I think almost everybody in Noosa knows Jim. They know Jim because he's got his eponymous restaurants, Berardo's and also Berardo's on the beach. Both of them are absolutely fantastic, and you've been here for about 10 years or more.
Would you try 13 years, 2 months, but who's counting? It's been 13.
13 years. So, Jim, you've got 2 restaurants. What do you think makes a restaurant special?
Well, I think it has to capture the community that it's in, I think, is one of the most important things. I think for Noosa, when we first opened Berardo's restaurant and bar, we did it with a lot of fanfare because at that time, Palmer's restaurant, which was the equivalent of fine dining, had gone, and it was one of our favorite restaurants, and we kept coming back to it and kept thinking, wow, there's a missing ingredient here in Noosa. There isn't a fine dining restaurant. So we came in, saw that need, and built that restaurant. And only at a time when fine dining restaurants were going by the wayside. They were falling out, and people were more interested in eating in casual. So we opened up the restaurant, but then...
That's a pretty gutsy effort, though, knowing the attrition rate for people falling by the wayside.
Yeah, no, it was. But we did it probably from a business point of view. We're among business people here. We did it all the wrong way when we started because we did it from the table side. We didn't do it from the business side. So we did it everything the way we wanted to see dining when you go out to a restaurant, the way you want to be treated, the kind of food that you were offered, the dining, the style and all that sort of thing. We quickly learned after hundreds of thousands of dollars and that we needed to kind of get more business-minded with it, and we did.
I think that resonates with a lot of people, that they have the passion first, and a lot of people that start their own business have the passion without really having the sort of the technical know-how behind them. And I think that a heck of a lot of people I know in Noosa started that way, which makes it very difficult for you to, first of all, sustain yourself long enough until you learn the real McCoy nuts and bolts. But the thing about your story, which I think is so fascinating, is that I don't know if many of you know, I'm sure a lot of you know that Jim worked in New York City for a long time, but he was actually born and raised in sort of small town Pennsylvania. And I want to ask you, how do you get from a small town in Pennsylvania, first of all, to New York City, to be one of the most successful CEOs of a multiple hospital administration team? And I want to know, when you were in New York, what a typical day was, and how the heck that structured itself to get you to where you are in Noosa, which is it's a world away, literally.
Well, first of all, I grew up in a small town called Latrobe, Pennsylvania, famous for 2 things: Rolling Rock beer and Arnie Palmer. Those 2 things. It was a very small town, not unlike Noosa, about 20,000 people. And it probably, the reason I see a whole lot of people come in and out of Noosa, particularly people who have this dream that they sold up and they want to come in and go into business. And they come up and they get very disheartened because Noosa has this impression of this very cosmopolitan city. We forget, and I didn't realize this until I was here for 2 years, that we are really a really smart, sophisticated little country town with 35,000 people through. And 13 years ago, it was like that. Way more sophisticated than others, but it has its own culture, its own style. And that brought me to Noosa and made me love Noosa. How did I go from Pennsylvania to New York City? By way of university in Washington, D.C., in Georgetown University and George Washington University, graduate school in healthcare administration. Had the privilege to work in some really terrific hospitals in the States, one of which was my own alma mater, Georgetown. I was there for 10 years, and ironically, my first job was running the obstetrical department, believe it or not, which was an interesting first job out of university.
Makes your eyes water.
That's it. Yeah, what the hell am I doing here? And then from there, I made my way up to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and from there up to New York City at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and then ultimately at Cornell and Columbia universities, and then at New York Hospital. And just did my time and made my way, and it was something I was passionate about. My specialty was running physician groups. So I did not so much the hospital, although I have run hospitals, my forte was running large medical groups. When I left New York Cornell, because the two hospitals, Columbia Presbyterian and New York Hospital, each with about 1,500 beds each, merged into one hospital. We had two medical schools, Columbia Presbyterian and Cornell. My job was trying to bring the two faculty together. I was very thin, I had hair, and I loved my job. And I had a good time before that job. But it was just absolutely amazing. There were about 4,500 physicians in both institutions that we had to try and organize. There were two, if you can imagine, anybody knows hospitals, there were two of everything, two cardiothoracic surgeons, two general surgery chairs, and so we had to divvy up, find a way to sort out who was going to do what, with basically one hospital that had merged into two. So that was that story.
So I think everybody in businesses always said that you should have an exit strategy. And I'm not talking about your current life, I'm talking about you must have had some form of exit strategy or some kind of escape mechanism that got you out of New York and ended up in Noosa.
It did. Well, I have to say my first trip to Noosa was, I think it was May of 1981. And I had a picture of myself that a friend took of me standing out in the Noosa National Park, I think it was the Boiling Port, of me overlooking Noosa. And it sat on my desk for all those years, and I said to myself, someday I'm going to live there. And it was about 2 years before I actually made the move. I said to myself, I'm doing it this year. And it took me 2 years to do it, but there. One of the things I heard Jillian say before, and it is so true, I think I've had a couple of sea changes in my own life in terms of what I've done and all that sort of thing. I grew up with an Italian immigrant father who was in business, and like all Italian immigrant parents, they want the big family and everybody around them. So my father owned businesses. I was a proud owner of about 4 car washes and some motels and all that sort of thing in our little town in Latrobe, because my parents didn't want us to leave. And so we got forced into, or I did that for a while and realized it wasn't my thing. I did the healthcare administration thing for about 25 years. And Jillian, you're absolutely right. When you start asking yourself more than 2 times in 1 week, what the hell am I doing this for? It's time to make that change. And that was what I did when I left New York. It was time to come to Noosa.
So Jim, you've lived here permanently since 1999, but you've been coming here since 1981.
Yes.
So I think you're pretty well qualified to comment. Do you think that we've grown since then as a town, and do you think we've grown in a positive way?
I think we've grown, and I think we've grown a hell of a lot, and we've grown beautifully. And I think everything must change, and everything has to evolve. And I'm very, very proud of Noosa and how it has evolved. And I think we have a long way to go, and we will keep, and I hope, with our recent de-amalgamation vote, 82% of us feel that way, that we are going to protect this little puppy for as long as we can in our generations, and hopefully for all the generations in front of us. We're going to leave this very, very special place with low density, low rise, and a community spirit that I've never experienced anywhere in the world.
So Jim, what would knowing that we're going to get our thanks largely to you and your team, we're going to get our council back in January. What's your biggest fear for Noosa going forward from now?
Well, I think there are 2 fears. And one is we've got this thing called transition that we must work through now to get to our new council. And I think one of the immediate things you want to do is that I think our future rests with being good neighbors and good partners to our neighbors, to the Sunshine Coast Council, and perhaps hopefully Fraser Council, and bringing them into. One of the things that we need to do, because we're all Noosaphiles here and we speak the same language. I've heard from a million of those, especially at the Food and Wine Festival. Oh, are we allowed in? We're your step cousins from down south. Of course you're allowed in. You aren't our step cousins. I think one of the things that we really have to do is make sure that we do this with them. We treat them with dignity and respect, not with emotionalism and not with anger, because they're naturally, we've divorced them. We've said we don't want to be a part of. Not that we don't want to be a part of you. We want to be protect this wonderful place called Noosa and the characteristics we have here.
But sorry to interrupt you, Jim. I just wanted to ask you. One of the things that keeps coming up time and time again, and your businesses are both in Hastings Street, and regardless of where anybody lives in Noosa, Hastings Street is it's like taking away the Statue of Liberty out of New York and expecting people to still want to go there. So Hastings Street is a fundamental part of what brings people to town. We often talk about the fun police and how they have curtailed our natural instincts of having fun and enjoyment and music and all of those other things that make that strip particularly. I'm not isolating Hastings Street, but you know what I'm saying, is that would it be one of your fears that we're ending up like a sort of retirement village?
Well, I think we're already there, for God's sakes. I mean, when I walk down the street, I mean, half the people that are here, I don't know what the hell they want. I think it's like we're the closest thing to a assisted living you could be right now in Noosa. The whole thing that brought me to Noosa, and I think keeps us all loving Noosa, is the fact that we're free spirits, we're fun, we're artistic, we like alternative, we're crazy, we like doing things like that. We have to bring that spirit back. And I'm sure, where are you, Juanita, that's part of the expression in Welcome Noosa, that we need to teach people as well. This is not about just sitting down and being nice and all that sort of thing. It's about having fun and letting people express the fun however they want. If they want a quiet time, there's lots of B&Bs around and lots of quiet places to go stay. But if you want a party, let's give them a party.
And Jim, you've won many awards, nationally and also statewide. Why do you think that you are consistently listed in the top restaurants in Queensland?
Well, I think one of the things that our mantra has always been, even when we started from the other side, we have one major thing, and we call it the theater of dining. People just don't want to go in and have a bite to eat and leave. They want the whole experience, and especially now with the dollar the way it is, they want lots of added value, whether it's music, whether it's a little Amos Bush, a little extra course, a little happy birthday sung to them, happy anniversary sung to them, all of these little millions of things that you can do to make your customers happy. I think that's been our mantra. Yeah. Great service, great food, and particularly now great local food. We live in one of God's countries here, or God's best part of the world with our produce here. And we have one of the best, the Noosa Farmers Market. We have some of the most generous and exciting and innovative producers, which is why we did the Food and Wine Festival, to say thank you to those folks, because you're living in a world that very, very few people, a percentage of us, get to live. Only this bit, and you got to appreciate it and do that. And I think that's been rewarded by virtue of those
but not one to rest on his laurels. He doesn't just sort of have one or two of the best restaurants or nationally recognised restaurants. He also has many other events, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware of them, Just tell me what made you think of these for a start. How do you get them? How do you draw these people in? And what's it done for your business profile?
Well, I think part of the event concept that we did 10 years ago when we started the then called the celebration of Australian food, Noosa style. We had our eyes on being national at that time, and hence the Australian style, but kept Noosa in the title all the time to express that. And we were just lucky. We live in a very special place. It's not hard, and I would love to take all the credit for this, and it's not hard when you call George Columbaris, when you call Matt Preston and say, hey mate, can you come up for a festival and spend 3 or 4 days in Noosa? Let me think, yes? They're there in 2 seconds. So Noosa itself sells itself, and they really, really love coming up here. One of the international chefs just wrote me back a thank you this morning, and this is the biggest compliment we could ever received. You have been now ordained as chef schoolies of the world. So all the chefs come now. It's their schoolies week. I thought that's fantastic.
Now just bringing you back down to earth for a minute, as a business owner, one of the biggest things that I address and a lot of other business owners have to address is staff issues. Because we've got a relatively thick layer of transients in our community, especially in something where you don't particularly need a degree to be in the service industry. How do you get the right people, train them, keep them, and motivate them?
First of all, you look for the right people. Somebody mentioned passion before, and you're right about passion. Anybody who comes through our interview process, the number one question I have very few questions. I let our managers sort out their technical abilities and stuff. I look at their personalities, and you usually know in 15 to 20 seconds whether somebody's going to fit in personality-wise with you. But one of the things that I tell everyone is that we're all about, if you're here to make money, this is not the place to be. It's all about in your heart and passion in the industry. You'll see that with our chefs, you'll see that with our wait staff. We don't always get it right, and God knows we make more than our fair share of people, but it's passion, and you want to get people. I'd much rather have someone who's going to give me 6 months of passion and dedication and devotion and loyalty than somebody who's going to be there for a year, 2 years, and work their way through. So even and they're wonderful, bright, smart people who are backpackers who are coming through and will give you 3 or 4 or 5 months. There's some spectacular people in there. I have a lot right now. If you came into Berardo's right now, you'd think you were in France somewhere. We're 80% French and French speaking in the restaurant. But they're really great, loyal people. The French have this passion for food, and so you go where the passion is.
Now, we've spoken about this a lot, Jim, and a lot of other people in this room have spoken about Noosa business owners having to work together to keep us buoyant, to keep the economy buoyant. How would you encourage all the business owners, not just in the restaurant game, how would you encourage us to work together to keep our economy buoyant?
I think it's and it's really almost a question for the tourism Noosa folks, because that's their mantra, that's what they try and work so hard at and do. And I think their current model going forward right now is a great one, because leisure market isn't here anymore, and so you've got to look for where the business is, and they're doing that right now and doing things to build up that business. But I think one of the things that we could do to help ourselves within that structure is to look for like-minded businesses, to look at synergies or packages. Not packages so much as economic packages, but look for ways to make things work. I'll do an analogy of what I do know. One of the last things I did in New York was buying up lots of hospitals. I was in an academic, obviously Cornell and Columbia were academic medical schools. We had 44,000 specialists and no primary caregivers, which is the problem with American medicine. You don't have that here. You've got lots of primary care people, and you can't go to a specialist. There, anybody can refer to a specialist. So we found ourselves with managed care there, that meaning people coming in and being told you must go to these doctors, that we have 4,000 of these monsters that are costing $1 billion to run. We have to get relationships. And so in the same way that we went out and developed relationships and bought practices to develop relationships with those primary care physicians, I think that same analogy works here. We need to, like-minded businesses, the same demographics, because we are, let's face it, we're all different, and we appeal to different parts of the demographic. And I think smart people will organize your little subsets of demographics and make referrals to within, not, it's silly to refer a CEO who's used to being pampered and a lazy ass who won't do anything, sending them out on something that he or she has to work or do something. That's not going to work. But you appeal to like-minded people who have those experiences and try and create those.
Yeah.
Somehow.
I agree. I think that the hardest part that I've come up against is instigating creative ways of networking with like-minded businesses or likened businesses to mine, is to keep the passion and the interest going without having to be the instigator all the time. And with you, Jim, regardless of how little support you've had over the years, you've always seemed to just keep plugging away. So I think that that's another message that you've said to me, is you just got to keep going. You've got to keep going until you get there.
And you got to keep reinventing yourself. Hastings Street has been, we've tried, God knows, we've tried to reinvent it over the last 10 years. One of the smartest things we've done, other than Frank, thank you for helping us get the permanent fix to the beach and keeping sand on there, which was probably one of the most important things for tourism and people coming up. The other thing was having the foresight to dig into our own pocket and getting all of my colleagues in the Hastings Street precinct to do $11 million fit out, probably 2 years before the GFC hit. Had that not happened, we'd be in a lot worse shape, because we'd have this old facility, so I think those two things helped happen. However, one of the things we have right now is a horrible situation with rents. People, it hasn't corrected, and the product isn't right yet on Hastings Street to what the client is right now. We've lost my contemporaries, and meaning the people would come up for 10 days and drop $2,000 or $3,000 a pop in one of the shops. They're gone. Yeah. There's few and far between. What's up here now are the 30-some-year-olds with a couple of kids. They're off for 4 or 5 days because they can't afford to take any more, and they'll shop. They'll drop 400 or 500. That's their thing. But they don't have the right shops yet on Hastings Street. Probably Noosa Junction and Noosaville might be a little bit better off in making that transition that Hastings Street does. Costs are just, and it's a horrible situation. Yeah. Many of the people who own on Hastings Street cannot afford to lower their rents, or the bank's going to call them in. And it's a horrible thing to say, but that's where a lot of them are.
Just to change the subject a little, what do you see now that our new Noosa Council's coming back? What do you see as the critical or the key areas that you think that the new council should be focused on? I'm thinking things like economics and sustainability and.
I think, to me, and I know I'm not wrong. I'm not going to even correct myself. 82% of us said nobody's going to mess with Noosa. If you come in, you're going to have 82% of us chasing you out. One thing I've heard from everybody, and I feel personally from all my friends who are relationships who are separated now, and or who have left, and it's one 4-letter word, and it's JOBS. Jobs. We have to get this economy rolling. It has to be the #1 issue for the new council coming in. We have to create business, and we have to really not play games with tourism, and we need to strengthen, and as our team is doing right now, we need to work very hard at building and growing that tourism. one, and we also need to look really hard at other kinds of industries that will spin off things.
Yeah. And Jim, the word sustainability is a big sort of buzzword worldwide, but particularly for our region. We're a primary producing area, and we had Shane Stanley here last month, which was an absolutely fantastic opportunity to hear about his passion and how he got the Noosa Farmers Market going, and also how he is helping to support our local producers to the tune of what the Noosa Farmers Market is responsible for $50 million a year in our economy, which I think that most people were absolutely staggered, but that is an irrefutable fact, is that's how much money that generates. But his obvious passion is sustainability, and this is one of yours as well, Jim.
It absolutely is. One of the things in recent times, and it really hurts for people who work so hard, like it's not just me, it's the team on our event. And I know Garth Proud and his team at USM and the folks at Noosa Long Weekend. They all work their asses off because they're all so passionate about what you do. And when somebody takes a swipe at you in the paper, really, really hurts when they think that you're just sitting there wasting money. Now, tourism, now I'm going to surprise. Damien, you're still here? Great. I've got some great news for you. Now, one of the things that the Noosa, it's taken us 10 years to get there, but this is what can happen when you work together. Tourism Noosa, Sunshine Coast Council, Tourism Events Queensland, and Tourism Australia together. And we have raised, I just got these numbers a few days ago. Public relations number, the media coverage for the Food and Wine Festival was 15.5 million nationally and 2.5 million internationally. That's nearly $18 million. Now, name any other small regional town in Australia that can pull that kind of media. Noosa can, and Noosa does. And it does similar things with the Tri. One of the things that you'll hear soon, and because as part of our funding requirements with Tourism Events Queensland, we have to do what they call an economic study. So they pay half, we pay half of a person to come in that studies all of the impact. Last year we were on 5 million. We had 30,000 people through the event this year. It was just incredible for 4 years. 5% of those were international visitors, 32% were interstate, 27% were intrastate, far north, and Brisbane, and the rest local, whatever that reciprocal is, 37, 40%. That's astounding, and astounding that working together we can make something like that happen here in Noosa. And for a small return, for a very small amount of money, Damien would attest to this, that they provide to the event, you get a gigantic return. You're looking at 1,000, 2,000% return on the money that you give. Probably more. My math skills aren't very good right now, but it's that kind of thing, and we're probably going to see 10 million. That's the kind of thing that's it brings the right demographic, it brings the right people here, it spreads the right word. We're not using up our resources, we're making it sustainable, and we're educating people about Noosa and what we do here. And I think
Jim,
critical for our future.
You've just celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Noosa International Food and Wine Festival, but something's going to happen next year.
Yes, it's not yet announced.
It's about to be.
I'll tell you it's in the works because obviously these things don't happen overnight. We're in discussions right now, and this is how you can leverage events into something else. Because there is so much infrastructure, if I told you that Noosa International, the Food and Wine Festival, is about $2.5 million to stage. That's a lot of money, that's a lot of infrastructure that's in there. A lot of airfares being paid, a lot of people, 285 people were brought in from around the country and about 40 of those from around the world. Experts as in chefs, producers, and other things. So we're in discussions now for next year is to try and leverage 2 or 3 days at the end of this festival into something we're calling the World Food Institute. So not a World Food Congress, because that's messing with other government things, but in the current Australian government China white paper, we're looking at, because we have all the ingredients here. We have the infrastructure, we have amazing people in the area doing produce, and we have so many of these people already here. So we're looking at adding 3 days, and not the tourism thing, but we're talking about a conference to bring people in from around the world to debate the issues of what we're calling plant, eat, grow. So looking at what we plant in the way of animals, plants, and fish, and then looking at how we grow them, looking at technologies like smart gate, farm gates, and all these new technologies that are out there, and plain old rooftop gardens and victory gardens that many of us grew up with, reinventing those. They predict that in 20 to 30 years, we're not going to have enough food here on the Asian side of the things to feed people. So there's no better, from a food security point of view, there's nobody better than Australia, and there's certainly nobody better than Queensland, and central Queensland, I say, to do this kind of thing and to make a stamp on at least our part of the world with that thing. So stay tuned. We'll see where it goes. But it's these kinds of things that I think roll into bigger things that solidifies our future in terms of where we go.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine that we are going to be instrumental in educating and sustaining the world food resources and sources by what Jim is trying to do here next year, which is absolutely unbelievable.
Just let me just say this: it's not me, and it's a whole bunch of people who are sharing this, and influential people. One of the great things, and this is one thing I really want to impart on everyone. There is an amazing resource, and you mentioned it tonight in the room. There are so many people up here in Noosa under the radar, CEOs, people with amazing capabilities, skill sets, and all that sort of thing. Just ask. They don't want to be out there, and they don't want to be told, or they don't want the limelight. They've been there, done that, but they are willing to help. And on this project, there are 4 or 5 mega people working on the idea to bring it forward for Noosa, not for Jim Berardo, but for Noosa.
No, I'm sure we know that, Jim, but it does take somebody to drive it, and I think that you are a big driving force, and I think everybody recognises you and appreciates you for doing that. I just want to ask you one last question. We've touched on networking as a support and promotion of local business, but how do you see the Noosa Chamber of Commerce's role in our business community? How would you like us to be performing and acting to help this?
I think doing what you're doing right now. Where do you start with a question like this? No negative aspirations at all. We are a very parochial, tribal place here in Noosa, and we're a tribal place in the Sunshine Coast, etc. How do you break up tribes, and how do you create a union? You do it by exactly what I saw tonight. You just do it softly. You do it gently. You're not gonna come in and evoke some long histories and long pegs in the sand, like the Hastings Street Association, the Noosaville Association. Everybody has their little bit of turf, and everyone will do it. I think there's room for all of that stuff. You just have to do it, and do it softly, and do it gently, do it with dignity and respect, in the same way we have to deal with the transition with council. Not down your throat, you must sign and you must do this.
Well, I think you've done it very gently, softly, kindly, and firmly tonight. Thank you so much, Jim.